I'm Charlie Jardino, Clerk of Court of St. Landry Parish. I've been in this job since 1992, and it's been my pleasure to serve the people of St. Landry Parish as their clerk. One of the favorite parts of my job is the archives and the responsibilities and the opportunities that go along with taking care of the archives of such an old parish. We were part of Imperial St. Landry Parish when it was created. And so we have records that go way back to the 1700s. Matter of fact, this courthouse was completed in 1941, but the first courthouse was built here in about 1920, and I'm sorry, 1837. There was also a structure here in 1806. 1820, it burned down, and it burned down again in 1939. That's when the present courthouse was built. Fortunately, the records were kept in an outbuilding and they weren't lost. So we have records all the way back to the colonial period. The first clerk here was Judge Lee, and he served as a clerk from 1805 to 1807. He became the parish probate judge from 1807 and he served until 1842. Our colonial records cover a period of 1764 to 1803. They're on microfilm here and available on microfilm, and they're also at the state archives. The notarial records span the time period of 1820 to 1850, and the first parish recorder was here in 1845. We have records that are imaged and indexed in various periods from the 1800s to present, and in mid 2015 we should have a constant record that's imaged and indexed and available online from 1800 to the present day. We're pretty proud of that, and it should be completed early next year. I'd like to introduce our archivist, a former archivist who's retired now, Mr. Keith Fontenot, and he can expand on what I've told you about our records here in St. Landry Parish. Thank you.
Good day. Today we are going to continue our conversation regarding primary historical documents in the St. Landry Parish Clerk of Court archives. I have had the occasion more than once over the last 35 years to help newcomers who come in to the courthouse. For instance, an individual one day, he or she thinks, well, family gatherings, society is changing. 50 years ago or more, people went to their grandparents every Sunday. They got together with the extended family. They knew who their grandparents were, their great uncles, their first, second cousins. And again, society did have a different mindset, and family was really important. However, today, as technology has come in, society has really changed in some ways, that there is no longer that strong family connection, which historically people did not move into a new area or the frontier alone. They usually went with a support group, a family, extended family, and so forth. So in a lot of ways, human society has changed, say, since the 1950s, 1940s. Myself, as a child, I well remember going to both sets of grandparents. And again, on the holidays, it was a very festive occasion. French was spoken, and there was a few English words that were thrown in. But it was basically a family-oriented mindset, which regrettably today seems to have fallen apart. So people now, in the early 21st century, are interested in trying to find out who they are, where did my grandfather, my family originate, and the records in the clerk of court's office are very vital in fulfilling that need. People who come to the courthouse for the first time feel rather intimidated. Again, you have the legal process, the courts that are working, and the present day work that continues. But you also have the older historical records. Marriage records, estates, probates, and so forth. One should consider it to be an adventure and also an education. First of all, if you're lucky, your parents could have purchased their marriage license here, which would give you the names of the grandparents and that. This is pretty typical, say, back to 1912. However, prior to 1912 to 1865, civil marriages do not list the parents. They do not list the age or place of birth. In fact, some of our better marriage records are some of the earlier ones, say from 1810 to 1820, where they do list the parents and the nativity or place of birth of the nuptial couple. But as one comes into the office, he or she could be overwhelmed by the different documents, the handwriting, and what do I do? Where do I go? How do I proceed? So it's not an impossible task. It does require work, long hours of looking through indices and trying to establish a line. The biggest problem is that the earlier records are handwritten, and calligraphy is very shortly disappearing from the human mindset. Computers, typewriters have made communication much easier. What I have in front of me today are two books. One is the record of the district court in 1822, And in this book in front of me is the original copybook from 1805 to 1810. You do have, however, earlier documents concerning the Opelousas Post that are housed at the Louisiana State Archives in Baton Rouge, which would go back to around 1764 with the establishment of the Opelousas Post. So again, it depends upon the individual that you are searching. In a lot of cases, if it's a common Creole name or Anglo name, you might be going back into a common gene pool. One should also consider using Reverend Hebert's Southwest Louisiana records, because the Catholic Church was very meticulous about listing parents. However, if they were married by a justice of the peace or a Protestant minister, you would only have the civil marriage, and if it does not give the parents, you have a problem. Again, census records would also help out too. But again, the enumerator who would have been taking the census might have been, say, from New England, the Midwest, and when they came into what would be considered the South of the South, or the northern Spanish borderlands, they entered into a different world. And these records in the clerk of court's office do represent that different world. The individual who comes in faces a host of unique problems. First of all, what does the document do? What is it? Is it a sale? Is it a family meeting concerning an estate or a probate? The probates are very essential in giving the researcher the material culture. What property did these people own? It was real estate, slaves, hoes, rakes, plows, livestock. Again, Opelousas is basically a frontier district, a rural district, where the wealth has always been derived from the land. Early on, it was the cattle kingdom of the United States prior to the admission of Texas in 1845. You had large vacheries, or cattle ranches in the prairie, where individuals would hire people or put their slaves there to tend the cattle. And again, the livestock was usually rounded up once a year. New calves were branded and so forth. And brands and earmarks were also very important in identifying each individual's livestock, being hogs, sheep, cattle, horses, and so forth. So it's so you're looking basically at a frontier district that was inhabited by crocodiles or alligators in the bayous, panthers, wolves, and bears. And the police jury minutes reflect that they were paying $50 pork pelt for a wolf pelt. So that was a substantial amount of money in 1810. For myself, my surname is Fontenot, which, again, is a very common name in southwest Louisiana. I did my research years ago, being able to work with the records and being fluent in French has really assisted in the research. People do not realize that 20 miles would basically be the distance that a horse or carriage would travel within one day. So you do have these different nuances, culture that you might have maybe Acadians in Lafayette and St. Martinville, Alabama French or French Creoles in Opelousas, along with Anglo-Americans. What's interesting is that the Anglos were in the Opelousas post prior to 1803. Thomas Jefferson knew what he wanted. He wanted Louisiana. He says, I'm going to, try to get the Isle of Orleans for control of the Mississippi Valley. The Mississippi is the third largest drainage area on Earth, only surpassed by the Congo and the Amazon. So whoever controls the mouth of the river, New Orleans, controls basically most of the North American continent, or the United States. There are also other factors to be considered where climate, nature, comes into play. Yellow fever was indigenous to Africa, and there is a theory going on where certain mosquito might have hitchhiked and a cask of water, an open cask of water aboard a ship, and made it over to the West Indies, and then spread the disease. Case in point, Napoleon's army in Saint Domingue and Haiti were decimated by yellow fever, and Louisiana over the years, especially in the antebellum days, did have yellow fever epidemics. So the climate, the volcano could erupt in the East Indies, like Tabora did in 1815, and the world experienced a summer that was basically a winter. There was no summer that year. Frost in August, and Jefferson and other individuals lost vast amounts of money with crop failure. Continue. When you come into the archives, do not be afraid to ask questions. This is a learning experience. People basically do not know what functions the clerk of court's office does. It is it retains the historical documents of the parish. And what makes the St. Landry Parish so unique is that prior to 1840, the parish went from the Atchafalaya River to the Sabine. south to the Gulf, north to Rapides and Natchitoches. So you have a number of parishes which were carved out of the original empire parish, as it was known as one time, since it was a very large political entity. Calcasieu was cut out in 1840, and other parishes were subsequently cut out of Calcasieu. Later Acadia and the Evangeline are cut out. So if you're doing research, the records here in Opelousas will give you a lot of information. The question is, how do you go about culling and digging and mining the records? There are certain problems that you have to come face to face with. First of all, not everything is typed up or in English. You get back into the 19th century, you're dealing with French and English that are handwritten and calligraphy. And sometimes even the English is hard to decipher. The researcher, faces several problems. What does the document do? Why is it written in handwritten? Well, again, the quill pen or the fountain pen was the word processor of that day. An individual in, say, 1815 was basically concerned about the issues that they had to deal with. The individuals could come into the office. Let's say there was a Frenchman and then there was an American that was a clerk behind the desk. The party that came in might have been illiterate. They said something with a heavy accent, and something was put down. And again, it's the old story. Something was said, something was put down. What did one nationality say, and what did the other nationality put down? And in a lot of cases, you have phonetic spellings of certain names. Again, do not assume that this is not your ancestor since it's not spelled correctly, because spelling or standard spelling as such was basically not used for many prior centuries. Again, your C's and K's are interchangeable, S's and Z's are interchangeable, I's and J's. The S and Z are also interchangeable. And again, an individual might be going by their middle name at one place and again by their first name in another document. And if you do not know both names, you might not get on the right track. So what I would recommend is talk to the employees at the clerk of court's office who are in the archives, that they can give you guidance and answer whatever questions you have.